one of the tools that's very efficient in the delivery chain, and that's what we're talking about here today. So I'll start explaining a bit more about Anico, explain how Anico and Octopus work together, then go into some of the Octopus Deploy use cases and benefits, and then we will have a demonstration, get some summary and some questions. So firstly, who are Anico? We're a company that delivers professional services, and we work in many sectors. We work on and around cloud platforms, so both building in IBM and Red Hat, Azure, AWS, and leveraging cloud-based platforms such as Octopus Deploy. We work with independent software vendors. We deliver system integration. We have come from a background of large-scale communication platforms. And in the top line, you will see a number of environments and sectors that we work in health, in government, in transport and utilities, and in technology companies. And all of these different customers have the same challenges in deployment, in that they're operating increasingly complex environments. Most enterprises at the moment, 95% of them, have one or more cloud environments. Some of these are product companies, and so they're delivering multi-tenanted platforms. And by multi-tenanted, we mean a piece of software that's released as a product to different customers, where those customers have similar core features, but unique configuration and environments. And then there are managed service environments. So for example, Anico is working currently in setting up an AWS environment for TransLink to operate a rail optimization service for Northern Ireland Rail. And that's running on AWS, whereas some of our analytics are running on Azure. The work we do for IBM is on Kubernetes. And so we're an example of a company that has a particularly complex environment. There are many different customers, many configuration settings. And you joining here may come from different kinds of companies, but what you can be sure of is that you have no longer a singular uniform environment. And so the original, if you go back to what you learned maybe in university and when you started off understanding software, very simple deployments here in any environment, whether you're serving an end customer or you're a government department or you're a business to business, you're managing an increasingly complex and diverse technological landscape. And so we have three core practices. We have one that focuses on Microsoft and the Azure cloud. And typically we're doing data platforms and reporting. And in Microsoft is a very integrated suite, and in Azure it has sets of DevOps tools such as Azure DevOps. On AWS, leading public cloud, we build new to market products and we deliver all kinds of technologies on and around AWS. And in our multi-cloud data platforms practice, there's increasingly a need for CI/CD, continuous integration and deployment in a DevOps environment. And what we're doing is enabling our customers to more quickly package, test, build, and deploy their software for different environments. And of course, you can't work in data without having an overarching governance and security. So Octopus Deploy, that I should have asked as people joined here, how many of you have heard of it before? But if you haven't, you'll learn about it today. And if you want to get into deeper detail, this is intended as an entry point discussion. If you want to get into a deeper workshop, you can arrange that with us and we can take you through that. So it's a tool, a platform that makes it easy to deploy, to automate deployments. And it's doing that by having automation built in that is repeatable from a single place so that you can deliver code faster and improve the reliability of that. So you're eliminating human error, and you're breaking down in a complex organization where you maybe have many development teams and you have different operational teams. It's a centralized environment where you can have greater visibility of what software is deployed with what configuration in what environment. And it was founded in 2012, has, maybe that number might be old now, but over 200 employees. And it started to solve a problem, which is that deployments were complex and you need to make it easy. But this grew from a need into a product and into enterprise environments as more and more features were added. And as those features get added, and now an enterprise delivery and sales team gets involved, and Octopus needs partners in local environments to do that. So while it's an Australian-based company, it's delivering all over the world. Inico is headquartered in Northern Ireland. We largely work in the UK and Irish market, even though some of our customers are in the US. And what we do is we train our staff. So, for example, Andrew here understands working with the Octopus experts and learning from them how best to utilize new platforms. We do joint events, so we do in-person events we've done, and Tony, who is on the line today, is from Octopus, and he's been part of some joint events and promotion that we do. And of course, we're trying to deliver a joint better experience for the end customer, where Inico can get to understand anyone trying to use Octopus for the first time. We can understand what your environment is, what your challenges are, and then help deliver early proof of concepts, supported training, and the like. So its key features, it's about automation at its core. Taking out the manual step, making it repeatable, making it configurable, and getting towards the ideal goal of configuration as code. It supports multiple clouds. So this one platform can work in an Inico's case where we have some customers and environments are on on-premise environment, some are in AWS, some are in Azure, some are deployed on Kubernetes, and we can deliver a multi-cloud environment and connecting in with the many, many products from different vendors we have in our continuous integration and continuous deployment toolchain. And when we want to take a singular product and manage multiple tenants of that for different customers, there's inbuilt very specialized support. And if you haven't heard of the term runbook, it's typically an automated sequence of steps. So you might, as part of your deployment or independently, need to be upgrading servers and patching environments. And so this becomes a singular tool to see and manage and codify those deployment features. So the benefits of introducing Octopus come firstly from driving the modernization, taking it from relying on a deployment engineer to repeat a step. They may be following instructions, entering on command line, and using a lot of different isolated processes in order to get that code onto the end environment. And by driving modernization in here, you're improving the overall consistency. So once it's proved to deploy with these steps and you're handling the appropriate errors, you're checking everything is going on, you're introducing the unique aspects of each environment and tenant, then that's a consistent process. So you know it can repeat without human error. And you can know it can repeat in a certain time frame and become more efficient in delivery. So your DevOps engineers move from doing the deployment to establishing the deployment processes, and then others in your team can have greater visibility of what's deployed where. And so that's a unifying environment when you have a complex organization. Maybe they have multiple clouds, they have multiple environments. And so this is overall, the more you use it and build upon it, you're simplifying the environment. So this isn't something new. It isn't something untested. You know, some of the key figures here, 25,000 companies are using Octopus Deploy. And when you count its core feature deployments, there's only over 150 million deployments to date. Now, when we work with customers all over the world in helping them deploy more reliably, some of them have different processes. They need to take their software from a development and test environment into a pre-production environment and into production. And they want to ensure that that's done on a staged and gated process. They want to know that everything is tested and checked, and they want to know that's done efficiently. So the advantage here is by making that faster, you can more quickly mirror those development, pre-production, and production environments, and ensure that the appropriate software is deployed in the right place. So there's a large user base against Octopus, and the reason maybe some of you are here, apart from understanding the product, is you know, if you want to try it out, like any new product, it's easy when you know how. And one of the steps we can help is that firstly, Andrew can take you through an example and show you the key features, but then we can do a more personalized training with you and give you support. And Octopus supply really good world-class free customer support to their customers all over the world. And what Anico adds to that is we can better understand your environment. So Octopus know their product, and Anico can learn more about your processes and give a more tailored response. So at its core, we're deploying, you have the ability to deploy to multi-cloud, hybrid, and on-premise environments with ease. And so this diagram probably explains in the most simple way where it sits in the process, which is that you have on the left developers, your teams arranged in Scrum teams or whatever your processes are, who are developing code and they're managing that code within repositories and continuous integration environments, which build and test and package those applications. So where Octopus Deploy fits in is between the continuous integration server, for example, Jenkins, and the end infrastructure environments. And you can see here the icons for Google, AWS, Kubernetes, etc. And we call these the end environments, the individual machines, the targets. And what Octopus is doing is saying, here's a development build 3.61 in that environment, test and production, and it goes through a sequence steps, which Andrew will demonstrate shortly. So it is allowing this process to be codified and taken out of command line and taken out of manual steps into a visual interface where you can see the process, and in this case, notifying business owners, getting an approval, deploying in this case, an API container, deploying a shopping cart, creating a web app, etc. So these will be unique to your application, but once you've got them in a process, they're repeated. And out of this, you're getting improved, not just visibility, but metrics, because you want to know how this is delivering value. And some of the things that are important to DevOps engineers is when there's a need to change a platform, you know, how quickly you can deploy a fix. There are cases where you want to ensure that any change you make does not break what exists, because that's bad, and the time to recover a service. So the value here is it's fast. It's you're getting faster to market or faster to your end customers, whether it's citizens or patients or end businesses. It's resilient. It's got a modern, secure environment, and this is critical because you're managing a lot of keys and secrets in very complex environments. And it's making sure this is clear and measurable. And the two kinds of key scenarios we might talk about in this diagram is to provide the managed service provider. So Inico operates service on behalf of some customers, and each of them are unique in what they have, but we can have one dashboard, one visibility to see what's going on in all of those services. And the other case is where we have a product being built and deployed for many different tenanted customers, where they each have their unique configuration and values from the same software. So I'm going to pause here and then pass over to Andrew, if you bear with me a second. So I'll stop presenting. And Andrew's going to share his screen, show you what Octopus looks like in action. He will take a couple of scenarios of increasing complexity and talk you through those. So Andrew, are you ready? Yep.
Yep, thanks, Colin. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Okay. And as Colin has mentioned, this will be a fairly basic demonstration of the functionality of Octopus Deploy. Anybody who is maybe familiar with the solution might find it a little bit basic and going over some of the old ground, but it's just to give everybody a flavor of what's available and how Octopus Deploy actually works and some of the features and functionalities. If people want to, we can dig into some more of the more in-depth features and functionalities on a later webinar. But as we go through the demonstration, I want us to consider that we're working as a DevOps engineer to try and give some context to it. So we're a DevOps engineer who's working for the Octopet Shop organization. So the Octopet Shop organization has a number of products, applications, services, as Colin has kind of outlined, that many organizations have, that we develop and we support for both ourselves and for other customers. And so currently we're part of a team that develops and manages one of the Octopet Shop's web applications known as Trident. So this engineer, they're involved in other projects. However, their focus this afternoon is going to be on Trident and in really specifically managing the deployment of the Trident application. Just to kind of give a little bit of flavor maybe about the application itself. So Trident, it's got a database component, it's a web package component, and they're coming off continuous integration services. So we're not going to look back into the continuous integration side of things today. We're just going to focus on the deployment, but just as Colin has described previously, Octopus Deploy fits into that CI/CD pipeline very well, coming out of continuous integration. So the DevOps engineer and the DevOps team need to be able to deploy the Trident application within an internal organizational environment, and then we're going to consider deploying it on out to some of the Octopet Shop's customers. And the team who are going to be managing the deployment are using Octopus Deploy, and you can see from the screen we're now in the Octopus Deploy platform using the user interface. So whenever you open the platform straight away, the first thing that you can notice is that we've actually landed into the cloud-based version of Octopus Deploy. So it's hosted on the cloud by Octopus for us. There are a number of self-hosted options available that you can host it on your own infrastructure. But given Octopet Shop's size and their requirements, they feel that hosting with Octopus is their best option. Doing that, they're getting most frequent updates coming through. They don't have to update the server themselves. Octopus are handling that for them. And whenever the engineer logs into Octopus Deploy, they first of all land onto this dashboard view. So right from the outset, you can see the level of visibility that the DevOps engineer gets. At a glance, they can see the state of the deployments to each of their environments, to their dev, test, staging and production environment for each of the projects that they're working on. And because this DevOps engineer that we're considering is working on OctopetShop applications, they're landing within a particular space. So they're landing within the OctopetShop demo space. And within Octopus, there are a number of different levels at which work or projects and products can be separated and segregated out. So the highest level of separation would be the space, and the space allows for engineers in this instance to develop an application here, but OctopetShop might have a separate application for animal health, and they move that into a separate space, and spaces can be considered independent of each other. So in this dashboard, we can see the deployment information that's relating to 3 projects within the OctopetShop Web Apps project group. And you can see there's 3 projects: Trident CAC, and Trident Tenancy. The engineer in question has been granted access to see all of these projects within this workspace. We're not going to delve into permissions and security a whole much more than that, but just to say there are a lot of functionality and features in there to make sure that team members who need to see this project can see it, but other team members who have no need to see it can be restricted and kept away. Can be kept away from it. So let's spend a bit of time with the engineer on the Trident project that they've been assigned to and see how they're going to manage their environments, their deployments, and their targets. So again, whenever we open up into the project itself, the engineer gets another overview screen. So this time it's limited just to the project they're working on, into the Trident project. And again, at a glance, they can see the status of their deployments and the releases to the various environments here. And there's nice clear color coding, with green being good, red being at issue, amber being somewhere in between. So it's very easy at a glance for the engineer to see the status of not only the status of their deployment, but whether there's any issues and where they might have arisen. So as you can see, because the guys at OctopetShop are good dev engineers, they're deploying to multi-environment. They have a multi-environment configuration. So they have their dev environment, their test environment, staging environment, and production environment. So very similar to a lot of organizations that we would work with. You can also see that they're also exercising control over which versions and packages can go to their dev and test environment and which can go to their staging environment. So the organization has mandated that a version of software, for instance, can't go straight from dev, test, straight to production and stage, and they have it mandated that they have to split those off. And requirements like that can be very easily handled within Octopus Deploy. Now you might think that adds a little bit of extra burden onto the DevOps engineer, but that's actually part of where Octopus's functionality starts to shine. So as Colm has mentioned, deployment into each environment is under the control of the same step-based process, which really is acting as a template or a recipe for deployment of the software. So if we click in to the process that's involved for deploying the Trident application, we can see that the process incorporates all the steps that are required to deploy the software to each environment. However, where it's appropriate, steps can be scoped and restricted to a particular environment. So if we look at the example here, step 4 in the process is being scoped to just the staging environment. So step 4 will not run on your dev, test, or production environments. It's restricted just to staging environment. And so that allows a lot of flexibility within the same process to be sure that you're covering off all the steps and aspects that that you need to. So just quickly running through the process, what's involved in this process for the DevOps engineer. Well, at the start of the process, they're determining if this is a deployment, is it a rollback, or is it a redeployment, which is something that will be used later on during the process. They're going to utilize a runbook to take some operational steps. That's be step 2. Then in steps 3 and 4, they're going to generate and output a report, which is going to outline some of the changes that are going to be made to the database and making sure that they get approval for those if they require. Piece 5 is then going to make those database changes. 6 will be working through deploying the application. 7 and 8 will be doing some verification of the application and updating web load balancers if required. And then step 9 is going to notify end users. So another consideration, as Colin has mentioned, for DevOps engineers really is ensuring that infrastructure and environment that the software is being deployed to is ready for the deployment process to occur. There's no point deploying an application if the environment that you're trying to deploy it to is not ready for it. And this is another area in which Octopus really helps with their functionality. So if you look more closely in step 2 of the deployment process, it's going to create a database. It's going to create the database through a runbook, and we can see that this step's actually calling a step from the runbook to configure the SQL server. And as Colin was mentioned, typically runbooks are how-to guides for engineers to complete commonly repeated tasks. And within Octopus, they're very similar to the deployment process. They're step-by-step processes, which help to automate those repeated tasks and procedures. So that could be a database backup, perhaps, or as in this instance, it's the creation of a SQL server. And by integrating the runbook automation into the deployment process like this, it ensures that the required elements, such as the creation of the SQL server, are available before the process tries to move to the next step. The other good functionality within Octopus is that not only can the runbooks be used within the processes themselves, but they can also be used outside of the deployment process. So you're using the same tool for multiple different purposes. So you're not having to train people a number of different times. So if we go back to the process, let's actually do a deployment to our staging environment. So to do that, we're going to create a release for the application. The application is going to be released to the release channel, which is going to restrict it to going to the staging and production environment. So this will be 3.0.20. We're going to choose the version of software that we want to go to. So that's 3.2.0. And we're going to save. So we've confirmed the packages for deployment, and we're going to now deploy to our staging environment. And deploy. And the process is going to start. And it should take a couple of minutes to complete. But what's nice for the DevOps engineer is they're getting more visibility again into the process. So there's task summary, so you're able to clearly see which step you're at in the process. If needs be, there's a task log, which is given a lot more detailed information about the process, which is helping with troubleshooting if we get to an issue further down the line. So you can see the process is starting to move through. So we're now in step 2. So it's going off and it's calling the runbook that we looked at previously to do the work on the SQL server to make sure that it's in place before the next step completes. If for whatever reason the process couldn't complete the runbook action, the deployment process would be paused at that stage to allow the engineer to go and fix the problem and then come back to the process. So it doesn't try to continue through the process until it gets that step in place.
Yeah, and just to add in, while that deployment is continuing, a great value of this is the DevOps engineers are specialists and have a lot of different tools and environments to work to. So your SQL expert may have created that SQL Server runbook, and somebody else can come and use that. And so by setting this up as a process, you enable enable greater visibility because you can see what's happening, but greater understanding across the organization, because I don't need to understand the complex details of Microsoft SQL Server, but I can see what is happening here through the text-based description that's been added and understand the process without knowing all the individual command line details. So it becomes a library over time that continues to build the more you use and share knowledge and reuse those runbooks across the organization.
Okay. Just as Colin was mentioning that, you might have seen the process actually then paused. So that was the step that was scoped strictly to the staging environment where it was requesting approval to be given. So this gives visibility and control for perhaps your QA department, that you can have it that the process pauses whilst the QA approves it or reviews a report. So the report is being generated here. The QA can view it and approve that.
Yeah, and what Andrew's describing is very important. Most of the most sophisticated customers we work with, while you might think CD, continuous deployment, in some cases automates the full deployment all the way. We more commonly see large organizations need to have an approval, a sign off, a last check within those processes. And as Andrew says, that's the opportunity to introduce that. So you're automating where possible, and you're ensuring the person in the middle with an approval or a sign off or a check can do that, whether it's in their staging or going into a pre-production.
So here's another one of the features or functionalities of Octopus that I was hoping not to have to show on the demonstration, but this is, if you have any issues with the Octopus, this is showing that there's an issue with this deployment. It now wants you to take action before it will proceed and will go ahead. So this now allows the action to be assigned to somebody, and you can decide, the DevOps engineer can decide what they're going to do with this deployment that hasn't worked. Investigated. And we will now fail this. We'll fail the deployment to allow for further investigation work to go on. But if we look through one of the previous releases, which went right through to completion, you get some of the information. It just shows some of the information whenever it works right through to the bottom. So each step gives you details and information about the process, and then it sends Slack notification out. There's other functionality to do with Jira integration and Slack notifications and bits and pieces like that. We'll not cover those today, but a lot of that functionality is in there. Just moving on to then quickly just to what actually we were deploying to, because we didn't really cover that. You can see within the infrastructure pieces, for the Octopet shop, they have their four environments, and they have multiple machines within each environment. The deployment targets are currently being shown as cloud regions for testing purposes. And you can also see the visibility here that you're getting again for the DevOps engineer. So these are all healthy. These are all healthy cloud regions. If these were virtual machines in Azure or AWS, you would be getting similar feedback on whether the deployment targets are healthy or not. Workers are another key functionality within Octopus. You can see workers basically allow you to delegate work to other machines as opposed to the Octopus server. So if you have a deployment process that's configured to run on a worker, Octopus will select a machine from the worker pool, execute that step, and then return back anything it requires to the Octopus server. As I say, you can maybe just see, as we mentioned before, and as Colin has mentioned, whenever we go to add deployment targets, you can see the range of targets that Octopus can go from cloud providers to Windows, Linux, Mac machines to Kubernetes, or even just an offline drop. Just to go slightly further into some of the other functionality that Octopus deploys, as Colin has mentioned, a lot of stuff is codified today. We have infrastructure as code, policy as code. Octopus allows for configuration as code within this. So we've moved now into another project, and this project is being version controlled. So you can see it's connected up to a Git repository, and it's allowing the DevOps engineers to store their configuration code for the deployment process alongside the application code, and to make use of the functionality of the functionality around the Git repositories. Then, so again, there's a lot that could be said about how you can integrate into Git and Git versioning and Git actions. I know we're running short on time, so I'll maybe just leave that for now. But again, if anybody wants to look at that further, we can do that. Just to touch briefly on the other main feature and functionality of Octopus is in regards to tenancy and that multi-tenanted model that Colin had described earlier, where perhaps you're deploying the application out not only within your own organization, but you're deploying it to multiple customers, and multiple customers who may be on different infrastructures across the board. And that's really where Octopus shines in their tenancy bit. So looking in this project, you can see that we have four different. We have an internal tenant, and then we have four separate customer tenants. Some of which may have multiple environments, maybe on multiple different deployment targets. And here you can see that we've been able to deploy some of a version of the application out into production for just our internal tenant and for one of our customers, whilst leaving the other customers on another version. So this may be your beta tester, for instance. The deployment process, it still uses the exact same deployment process as we had gone through previously, but whenever we go to make releases, there's a lot more functionality there and around who and how you can release those products out to.
Yeah, and just to add in there, what you might notice in the various customer production environments, there are different versions, and there can be cases where different customers are upgraded at different times. They might have paid for a different version. They might be in an early beta mode for the new release. Or it could simply be that they have different timelines set in their SLA, for when they expect their system to be upgraded. So that can not upgrading all software at the same time can add a complexity. Typically, here this makes it easier. So I think, Andrew, you've kind of covered a broad area of this to give a high-level view. And as Andrew said, the goal here is to let you see at a top glance what this looks like. But if you wanted to go into detail on it, we can do one-to-one sessions.